The alien princess pointed at the human warrior and declared, "Mother, I desire this one." His mission was clear: to establish a strong alliance with the Ravika Empire, a powerful intergalactic civilization. Jake had heard many things about the Ravika, their advanced technology, and their mysterious ways. But nothing could have prepared him for the extraordinary events that would soon unfold. The Ravika ship, a sleek, dark vessel, floated quietly in the depths of space. The crew, mostly made up of Ravika soldiers and diplomats, moved swiftly around the ship, preparing for the upcoming summit. Jake had been chosen for this mission because of his experience in negotiating with alien species. His reputation as a calm, collected leader preceded him. But as he stepped off the transport shuttle and into the grand hall of the Ravika Palace, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was stepping into the unknown. The palace was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. Tall, silver columns stretched to the sky, and soft, glowing lights filled the vast space. Everything was perfectly clean and orderly, as though time itself had been carefully controlled. The Ravika people, tall and elegant with their sharp features, moved gracefully through the halls, their eyes glowing softly in the dim light. Jake was escorted through the grand corridors by his Ravika guide, a stern-faced officer named Soren. As they walked, Jake couldn't help but notice the looks of curiosity and suspicion from the Ravika soldiers. It was clear that humans were not common visitors to the Ravika Empire, and even though Jake had been briefed on the importance of his mission, he couldn't ignore the tension in the air. At the end of the hall, they reached a large chamber where the summit would take place. Jake was introduced to the Ravika Council, a group of stern-faced leaders who appeared to be deeply invested in the success of the negotiations. They studied Jake closely, their piercing eyes evaluating him as if trying to read his very soul. But there was one person missing. The princess. Jake had heard about Princess Alia, the only daughter of Queen Ravilla, the ruler of the Ravika Empire. Alia was known for her beauty, intelligence, and strength. She was the heir to the throne and had been groomed to lead the Ravika people into a new era. But little did Jake know, his arrival would lead to a meeting that would change both their lives forever. As Jake stood before the council, waiting for the proceedings to begin, he couldn't help but wonder about the princess. What was she like? What role would she play in these negotiations? He didn't have to wait long to find out. The large doors at the back of the chamber swung open, and in walked Princess Alia. She was breathtaking. Her long, silver hair shimmered in the light, and her piercing blue eyes seemed to see through everything. She was tall, her posture regal, and every step she took exuded confidence and authority. She was dressed in a flowing, silver gown that reflected the light of the room, and Jake couldn't help but be captivated by her presence. Alia's eyes locked with Jake's for just a moment before she turned to address the council. She spoke in a calm, measured tone, her voice carrying an air of authority that left no room for disagreement. Her words were well chosen, each one carefully crafted to ensure the best outcome for her people. As she spoke, Jake found himself listening not just to her words, but to the power behind them. This was no ordinary princess. This was someone who would one day rule the Ravika Empire. The meeting lasted for hours, with the council discussing trade agreements, military cooperation, and the future of the galaxy. Jake remained silent for most of it, only speaking when it was necessary. His role was to listen, to observe, and to ensure that the alliance between Earth and the Ravika Empire was solidified. But despite the serious nature of the discussions, his thoughts kept drifting back to the princess. There was something about her that intrigued him, something that went beyond her beauty and her royal status. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but he felt drawn to her in a way he had never experienced before. At the end of the meeting, as the council members began to leave the chamber, Jake found himself standing alone with Princess Alia. She had been speaking with the council for some time, but now she was standing across the room from him, her eyes fixed on him. "Commander Carter," she said, her voice soft but clear, "I would like to speak with you privately." Jake nodded, his heart racing. This was the moment he had been waiting for. He had no idea what the princess wanted to discuss, but he knew it would be important. He followed her to a quieter part of the palace, where the noise of the council had faded away. "I've been watching you," Alia began, her voice still calm but now with an edge of curiosity. "You are not like the other humans I have met. You carry yourself with a certain grace, a confidence that I find intriguing. Jake shifted uncomfortably, unsure of how to respond. I'm just here to do my job, Princess. My only goal is to ensure the success of this alliance. Alia smiled, a small but knowing smile. And yet I feel there is more to you than that. You are a warrior, but you are also a man who thinks before he acts. I have seen it in your eyes. Jake was taken aback by her words. He had never thought of himself as anything more than a soldier. His life had always been about the mission, about protecting those who needed it. But Alia saw something in him that he hadn't realized was there. You're wrong, he said, shaking his head. I'm not special. I'm just a man doing what needs to be done. Alia took a step closer, her gaze never leaving his. Perhaps, she said softly, but I do not think that is all you are. There is strength in you, Commander Carter, strength that goes beyond physical power. It is the kind of strength that could change the course of this war. Jake's mind raced. What was she saying? Was she hinting at something more? And if so, what did it mean for him, for the alliance, and for his future? Before he could respond, Alia's voice cut through the silence once again. Mother, she said, her tone serious. I desire this one. Jake's eyes widened in shock. What did she mean by that? He couldn't understand it. Was she speaking about him? Did she want him for something beyond just the alliance? The implications of her words were immense, and Jake had no idea how to react. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Alia's eyes remained fixed on him, unwavering. Mother, I desire this one, she repeated, her voice filled with determination. Jake stood frozen, unsure of what was happening or what it meant for the future. His heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing with questions. But one thing was certain, the course of his life was about to change forever. The days following Princess Alia's declaration were filled with uncertainty and tension. Jake Carter couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. He had been chosen by the princess, an offer that seemed both impossible and strangely inevitable. But what did it mean? Why him? And what consequences would this have for his mission? The Ravika Palace, with its grand halls and towering spires, now felt more like a cage than a place of diplomacy. Jake had been assigned to a suite in the palace, the finest accommodations the Ravika could offer, but it was all too quiet, too still. Every time he walked through the corridors, he felt eyes watching him, both curious and judgmental. The Ravika people had never trusted humans fully, and Jake's presence here was an anomaly, a symbol of something larger than he could understand. One evening, as he sat in his room, going over the mission details once more, there was a knock at the door. He rose quickly and opened it to find a Ravika officer standing before him, a stern look on his face. Commander Carter, the officer said, his voice firm, the princess requests your presence in the training hall. Jake felt his heart skip a beat. What did Alia want from him now? He had already proven himself in diplomatic discussions, had he not? He followed the officer down the vast corridors of the palace, his footsteps echoing on the smooth, silver floors. When they reached the training hall, Jake was surprised to find Princess Alia already waiting for him. She was dressed in a simple, tight-fitting combat suit that accentuated her athletic form, her long silver hair tied back in a braid. There was an intensity in her gaze as she looked at him, a look that made Jake realize that this wasn't just another meeting. Commander, Alia greeted him with a small smile, but there was something serious in her tone. I trust you're ready for the next step. Jake felt a nervous tension in his chest, but nodded. What do you need from me, Princess? I need to see if you are truly worthy, she said, her voice steady and calm. You have proven your worth in diplomacy, but I need to know if you can handle the trials ahead. There is more to this alliance than just talking. There will be battles, both political and physical. You must be able to fight beside me when the time comes. Jake's mind raced. He wasn't sure what exactly she meant by worthy, but the princess was determined. She stepped aside, revealing the training arena. The space was vast, filled with training dummies, weapons, and various obstacles designed to test one's combat skills. Jake had been a soldier long enough to know that this would not be a simple sparring session. Alia raised her hand, signaling for the training to begin. I want to see if you can keep up, she said. Show me what you've got. Jake, ever the professional, quickly assessed the situation. He was here to prove his value, to show that he could be more than just a soldier. He was here to prove that he could stand by Alia's side, not only as a warrior, but as someone who could lead, fight, and survive alongside her. With that, he grabbed a practice sword and stepped into the center of the training arena. Alia stood on the sidelines, watching him with keen eyes. Without warning, the training dummies came to life. They moved at rapid speeds, attacking with artificial precision. Jake immediately sprang into action, blocking and dodging the blows as he faced off against the first wave. The weapons were blunt, but they still hit hard. Jake felt the burn in his muscles as he parried and countered, each strike requiring precision and focus. As he fought, Jake could feel the princess's gaze on him, her eyes never leaving his movements. There was something intense in her presence, a silent challenge in the way she watched him, as if testing his every move. The dummies continued their relentless assault, but Jake was quick, his body moving in perfect synchronization with his training. He had been in many battles before, but this felt different. There was no war here, no grand cause, but there was a deep, unspoken test. If he couldn't handle these trials, what would that say about him? About his worth? After what seemed like an eternity, Jake defeated the final dummy. He was sweating, his muscles aching, but his breath was steady. He turned to face Princess Aelia, who had been silent throughout the trial. "Well done," she said, her voice soft but filled with approval. "You've shown me that you are capable, but there is one more test." Jake was surprised. "Another one?" Aelia nodded. "Yes. This next test is not physical. It is about understanding what it means to fight for something greater than yourself. You will face me in a different way now." Jake raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Aelia began, "that you must understand the true cost of the war we are fighting. The Ravika Empire has been at war for centuries. We fight not only for our people, but for the future of the galaxy. I want to see if you understand that. I want to know if you are prepared to stand with me, not just as a warrior, but as an ally in every sense of the word." Jake stood there, trying to understand what she meant. It was clear that this mission was not just about military strength. The Ravika Empire had its own struggles, its own burden to carry. This wasn't just about proving his skill, it was about proving his heart, his mind, and his commitment to something larger than himself. "I understand," Jake said finally, his voice filled with determination. "I'm not here just to fight. I'm here to stand beside you, to protect what matters." Aelia's gaze softened, and for a brief moment, Jake saw a flicker of something more in her eyes, something deeper than the strategic coldness she usually displayed. She was not just a princess, she was someone with burdens, hopes, and fears. "You have passed the physical test, Commander Carter," she said, her voice full of respect. "But this next trial will be the most difficult. Are you ready?" Jake nodded, feeling a sense of purpose settle in his chest. Whatever came next, he was ready. He wasn't just fighting for a cause. He was fighting for something far more important, for the future of the galaxy, for the Ravika people, and for the woman who had challenged him in ways no one else ever had. Aelia stepped forward, her eyes locking with his. "Then let's see if you can truly become the partner I need." Jake didn't know exactly what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. His life was forever changed. The journey had only just begun. The days following Jake's successful trials were filled with both anticipation and unease. He had proven himself to Princess Aelia and the Ravika Empire in ways that few humans could ever dream of. But as Jake stood at the edge of the palace balcony, gazing out at the glittering lights of the Ravika capital, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. Aelia had given him a new role, one that extended far beyond just a warrior. He was now her trusted advisor and protector, a position that placed him directly in the heart of the Ravika court. Jake had always been a soldier, but this was different. He was learning about the complexities of intergalactic politics, the balance of power that controlled entire civilizations, and the pressure that came with it. One evening, after a long day of meetings with the Ravika Council, Jake was summoned to the throne room by Princess Aelia. She appeared troubled, her face drawn in concentration as she looked over a map of the galaxy spread across the table before her. "Commander," she said, her voice low and serious, "there are factions within my empire that do not approve of the alliance with Earth. They see your presence here as a threat to the old ways, to the traditions of the Ravika people." Jake stepped closer to her, studying her expression. He had always respected her strength, but now, seeing her so focused, he realized how heavy the crown she wore truly was. "I've heard whispers," Jake said, his tone calm. "But how serious is this rebellion? Are we talking about a coup?" Aelia didn't answer immediately. She ran her fingers along the map, tracing the borders of the Ravika Empire. "It's not just about the alliance," she said quietly. "It's about my rule." The old guard, the leaders who have served my family for generations, believe that I am too young, too untested to lead. They see you as a symbol of that weakness. They think you'll influence me, that your people will take over. Jake clenched his fists, his warrior instincts rising. What do they want? They want power, Alia said, her eyes darkening. They want to control the empire, and they believe that by removing me, they can put someone else on the throne, someone who will restore the old order. If they succeed, everything we've worked for, everything we've built will be lost. Jake felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He had known the stakes were high, but hearing Alia speak so frankly about the threat to her empire made it all feel too real. We can stop them, Jake said firmly. We can fight them, expose their treachery. Alia shook her head, her expression thoughtful. It's not that simple. These factions are well organized, and their influence stretches far beyond the palace. They have allies in the military, in the Senate, even in the ranks of my own bodyguards. Jake's mind raced. So they've infiltrated every level of the empire. That's bad, but we have a chance to fight back. I've faced odds like this before. We'll need to act fast, take the initiative. Alia looked up at him, her eyes filled with both determination and concern. You're right, Jake. We have to act quickly, but we also have to be careful. If we make the wrong move, it could be the end of everything. Jake nodded. He had fought in countless battles, but he had never faced an enemy like this, an enemy that moved in shadows, striking from within. He had to rely on his instincts and his ability to think several steps ahead. Over the next few days, Jake worked closely with Alia, planning their response to the rebellion. They began to gather allies among those loyal to the princess, military leaders, senators, and trusted servants. Slowly, they built a network of support, making sure not to tip off their enemies. But even as they prepared, the tension within the palace continued to grow. Whispers of rebellion spread like wildfire. The streets outside the palace were filled with rumors and protests, as the citizens of the Ravika Empire began to question the direction their society was heading. One evening, as Jake and Alia were discussing their plans in private, the door to their chambers burst open and a breathless messenger hurried inside. Your Highness, Commander Carter, the rebels have struck. They've taken control of the Eastern District. The city is in chaos. Alia's face went pale, but her eyes remained sharp with resolve. We don't have time to waste, she said quickly. Jake, gather our forces. We're going to make our stand. Jake nodded, moving with precision. He had no time for hesitation. He was a soldier, and his job was clear. Protect the princess, protect the empire, and defeat the rebels who threatened everything they stood for. The two of them moved quickly through the palace, gathering their allies. The palace had a vast underground network of tunnels, and Alia's loyal generals were already mobilizing the troops in the central square. There was no turning back now. As they made their way to the central command room, Jake couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. This wasn't just about defeating an enemy. It was about protecting a future, about standing with Alia against those who sought to destroy everything she had worked for. He had come here as a warrior, but now he was fighting for something greater than himself. When they reached the command room, Jake was met with a sea of faces. Military officers, advisors, and palace guards all gathered to prepare for battle. The atmosphere was tense, filled with urgency and fear, but there was also a sense of resolve. These people were willing to fight for Alia, to stand with her no matter the cost. We've got no time to waste, Jake said, his voice steady as he addressed the room. The rebels have the upper hand right now, but we're not going to let them win. We'll retake the Eastern District and show them that the Ravika Empire is not so easily toppled. Alia stepped forward, her gaze sweeping over the room. We fight not just for our empire, but for our future, she said, her voice firm. This is our moment. We must stand united. With a roar of agreement, the gathered soldiers prepared for battle. Jake felt a sense of pride swell in his chest. These were people who believed in their cause, in their leader, and he was ready to stand with them to fight by Alia's side. The first wave of rebels had already taken control of several key locations in the Eastern District, but Jake and Alia's forces were ready. They moved out under the cover of darkness, using the palace's secret tunnels to bypass the rebels' barricades. As they reached the front lines, Jake could hear the sounds of battle, clashing weapons, the hum of energy shields, and the distant roar of explosions. The air was thick with the smoke of conflict, and the city's once peaceful streets were now a war zone. Jake led a small team of elite soldiers to the rebel stronghold in the center of the district. The fighting was fierce, but Jake and his men pushed forward, determined to reclaim the city. They fought with precision and strategy, using every trick they knew to outmaneuver the rebels at every turn. Finally, after hours of intense combat, they reached the heart of the rebellion. There they faced the leader of the rebel faction, a former general of the Ravika military who had turned against Alia's rule. The two men clashed in a brutal duel, each fighting with everything they had. But in the end, Jake's experience and resolve won out, and the rebel leader was defeated. With the rebel leader captured, the remaining forces quickly surrendered. The eastern district was reclaimed, and the threat to Alia's reign had been neutralized, for now. As the dust settled, Jake and Alia stood together, watching as their forces cleaned up the aftermath of the battle. The city was still recovering, but the rebellion had been crushed, and their future was secure for the moment. Alia turned to Jake, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You were right," she said softly. "We couldn't have done it without you." Jake nodded, his gaze fixed on the city around them. "We did it together." But even as they celebrated their victory, Jake knew that this was only the beginning. The threat of rebellion had not disappeared. The empire was still fragile, and there would be more challenges ahead. But with Alia by his side, Jake was ready to face whatever came next. The dust from the battle had finally settled, but the city of Ravika was far from peaceful. The streets, once filled with the hum of everyday life, now echoed with the sounds of soldiers moving through the aftermath. Buildings had been damaged, and many of the city's citizens were still recovering from the shock of the rebellion. But for Jake Carter and Princess Alia, this was only the beginning of a new chapter. Alia stood on the balcony of the palace, her gaze lost in the distance. The sun was setting, casting a warm orange glow over the city. It was a beautiful sight, but it felt bittersweet to her. She had fought for this empire for her people, and now she was unsure of what would come next. The rebellion had been put down, but the trust of her people, especially those who had once supported the old guard, was not easily won back. Jake joined her, standing at her side. His presence had become a constant, a source of strength and calm in the midst of everything that had happened. He, too, had changed. He was no longer just a soldier or a diplomat. He had become something more, something vital to Alia's future and the future of the Ravika Empire. "How do you feel?" Jake asked, his voice soft but filled with concern. Alia turned to look at him, her expression thoughtful. "I feel relieved but also uncertain," she admitted. "We won the battle, Jake, but the war isn't over. The rebellion was only one part of the challenges I face. The council is still divided, and the people are still unsure of me. I need to show them that I can lead, that I can be the ruler they need." Jake nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "I think you've already shown them more than enough. You led them through a crisis, and you stood strong, but the real test will come in the days ahead." Alia sighed and ran a hand through her silver hair. "I hope you're right, but I still wonder if I'm truly ready. Sometimes I don't know if I can do this alone." "You don't have to do it alone," Jake said, his voice steady. "I'm here, you're not alone in this." Alia looked up at him, her eyes softening. "I don't deserve your loyalty, Jake. You came here as a stranger, and now you've become everything to me. I never expected this. I never expected to feel this way." Jake took a step closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "I'm not just here because of duty, Alia. I'm here because I believe in you. I believe in what you can do for this empire, for your people, and I'm here because I care about you." The air between them seemed to change. The tension that had been present since they first met, that sense of uncertainty and distance, began to melt away. Alia had always seen Jake as a strong and capable warrior, but now, standing here with him, she realized that he was so much more. He had become her partner in every sense of the word. I care about you too, Jake," Alia whispered, her voice barely audible. "More than I ever thought I could." Jake reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "Then let's face the future together. Whatever comes next, we'll face it side by side." Alia's heart skipped a beat. She had always been the princess, the ruler in training, the one expected to carry the weight of her people's future. But in this moment, she realized that she didn't have to carry that burden alone. With Jake by her side, she could share the weight of the throne, and together they could build something stronger than any empire, something built on trust, love, and the promise of a better future. The quiet moment was broken by the sound of footsteps behind them. They turned to see a group of Ravika officers and council members entering the room. The leader of the group, a seasoned general named Terk, stepped forward. "Your Highness," he said, bowing respectfully. "The rebels have been subdued and order is returning to the city. But there are still those who resist your rule. They will be harder to win over, but we have a plan." Alia nodded, her face hardening with determination. "I'm listening." "We will need to move carefully," Terk continued. "The council is divided, and there are still factions loyal to the old ways. We can't afford another uprising. But with your leadership, we believe we can bring those factions into line. It won't be easy, but it's possible." Jake could see the weight of the task ahead in Alia's eyes. She had fought for this empire, and now she was being asked to fight again, not on the battlefield, but in the courtrooms, in the halls of power where the fate of nations was decided. It would be a different kind of battle, one of words and persuasion rather than swords and shields. "Thank you, General," Alia said, her voice calm and authoritative. "We will take your advice into account, but know this, no matter what happens, I will never back down. I will do what it takes to secure the future of this empire, for my people and for all of us." Terk bowed again, and with a final glance at the two of them, he turned and left the room. The air in the palace felt heavy, but Alia stood taller now. She had found her resolve, her strength, and she knew that she was not alone in this fight. Jake watched her closely. "You're ready," he said quietly. "I can see it. You have what it takes to lead, Alia." Alia turned to him, her expression softening. "I don't know what the future holds, Jake, but with you by my side, I'm ready to face it, together." Jake smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle in his chest. This was more than just an alliance between two people, between Earth and the Ravika Empire. This was something deeper, something real. They were partners, not just in war, but in life. The next few weeks passed in a blur of meetings, strategy sessions, and careful political maneuvering. Alia and Jake worked tirelessly, both in the palace and in the streets, meeting with citizens and leaders alike. They knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but they were united in their purpose. Slowly but surely, they began to win over the factions that had once opposed them. One afternoon, as they stood together on the balcony once more, looking out at the city below, Alia turned to Jake. "Do you think we can really make a difference?" she asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. Jake squeezed her hand gently. "I know we can." And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting its golden light over the city, they both knew that whatever challenges awaited them, they would face them together. They had fought for this moment, and now it was theirs. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. As long as they stood side by side, there was nothing they couldn't overcome.